everyone. Thanks for joining us for this challenge series called Heroes and Villains. In this series, we're looking at lesser known people in the Bible who made an impact on the world in either a positive or a negative way. The foundation verse for this series, Micah 6:8, which says, "He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God."
So we're going to look at 12 different characters in this series. The first 4 who act justly or are very evil. The second 4, they love mercy or they take revenge. And the final 4 will choose to either walk humbly with God or they'll be consumed with pride. Our goal in this series is to learn through their examples, both good and bad, how to be a better disciple of Jesus. So if you're ready, let's dive in.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the 4th week of our Heroes and Villains series. And this week, we're going to look at a hero with a bad reputation, Rahab the Prostitute. Now, we can find her story in Joshua's 2 through 6. You may have heard of Rahab. She plays a big part in this story about the walls of Jericho that fell when the Israelites marched around them. But I want to look at this story from her perspective. As our story begins, Moses has just died and Joshua is now the leader of the Israelite people. The Israelites, they have been living in the desert for 40 years because 8 out of the 10 spies that were sent into the land God promised them 40 years ago said they weren't strong enough to take it. Now that Joshua, he is now the new leader. And so he's ready to move. He sends 2 men into Jericho, a city on the other side of the river, to get a pulse on things. So they forged the river and they entered the city. Now it's interesting to me where these 2 spies went, because they went to a brothel, which according to a lot of scholars was probably an inn as well. As I thought about this, I was impressed at the genius of this decision. They didn't go spy out the king's palace or check out the military strength. Instead, they went to a place where they could find out what people were talking about. What they discovered is that everyone had heard about the miracles and the victories that God had given the Israelites, and they were terrified of them. I'm thinking maybe this is where Joshua and Caleb may have gone when they went in and came back with a different story 40 years earlier.
Yeah.
These guys went in, they went to this brothel, but apparently someone in the end snitched on these 2 spies because the news quickly got to the king that they were there. And so the king sends soldiers to Rahab's house to get them. Now, we might be tempted because of Rahab's occupation to form an opinion of this lady that she was the scantily dressed lady standing on a street corner yelling slang. But she owned a home on the city wall, which is pretty impressive. She was the head of her household. She took care of her entire family, and she was a shrewd business lady, and she knew what was going on in the world around her. So somehow Rahab finds out about these soldiers coming, and she took the spies up onto the roof and she covered them up with some straw. When the soldiers arrived, she says, "Oh yeah, they were here, but they left before the city gates were closed. Why don't you go after them quickly? You might be able to find them." Then that evening when it was safe, she went back up on the roof and she had a chat with the spies. She said, "I know that the Lord has given this land to you. So swear to me that you will spare the lives of me and my family because I have shown you kindness." Then Rahab worked out a plan and she helped them escape through the window of her house. She tied a red cord in the window so that they would know which house was hers. And when the Israelites returned to conquer Jericho, Rahab and her family, they were the only ones whose lives were spared. Now, here's what's amazing. Because Rahab showed respect to God and kindness to the spies, she earned a place in the book read by more than any other in history, the Bible. And she became a part of the lineage of Jesus because she married one of the spies who was actually Aaron's grandson. Pretty cool, huh? Mm-hmm.
So I love this story. It's one of my favorites. We have that
Yeah.
painting in the living room. It has Rahab in it. So I love this. There's a lot I want to unpack. Definitely process this out with you if you'll let me.
Sure.
First of all, the fact that I've read this story a million times. I've studied this out. And I guess I'm slow on the uptake. I knew they went and they met with Rahab.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that she was a prostitute. I never thought about the fact that they were hanging out at a brothel to get this information. I don't know where I thought they met up or what. So that was kind of interesting for me. But I just wrote down a few things that really just stood out to me. Number one, that godly fear leads to faith. So we were taught that fear is bad, but there is a healthy fear, a godly fear. Yeah. And even though Rahab was not godly, you just told us. I mean, we just talked about how she told them, and we read that in Joshua. She said, I know that the Lord has given you this land. So because she was in a place because it was I guess like a hotel and a brothel at the same time, there were people coming and going all the time. And so there was a lot of conversation and information. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's in all my research, that's kind of what I've figured out.
Okay. So if they know, let's go there to get the information. She's not only hearing about what's happening in their kingdom, but she's hearing about the news of what the God of the Israelites has done. Mm-hmm. So for her to say, I know that the Lord has given you this land, shows a sense of godly fear. Look, I may not know your God, but I know enough about him to know what we have doesn't belong to us. Mm-hmm. So I think that is a great place to start, whether you're just starting this journey or you've been a believer for a long time. We find ourselves, and I can't tell you how many times you and I have had this conversation, I struggle with having faith here, or I don't know how to grow my faith here. And it's like you were sharing this story, and I mean, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Faith comes through a godly fear. If you don't understand the magnitude of who God is, that at any given moment, every breath we take is allowed. He's allowed us to exist.
Right.
So when you begin to go, wow, wait a minute, this is a star-breathing God. This is a God who has ordained everything. When you begin to realize how small you are in comparison to how big he is, and that holy fear kind of just comes all over you, that's when faith is built. She does not know anything about the Hebrew faith. She doesn't know. She just knows what she's heard, and that was enough to go, look, I ain't messing with your God. I'm not. Yeah. And that's, for me, I know that it's okay, so I need to step back and be reminded not about how big our government is, or how big COVID is, or how stressful financial situations are, but how big is God? What is God capable of? What has he done that he said he would do? Then there is a holy fear that builds faith. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah.
I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then building on that, every opportunity to fear is also an opportunity to trust. So there's the godly fear that she had. Mm-hmm. Would you say that there was also an opportunity to be terrified for her life, knowing, oh, these spies are here. We know what they're capable of.
Sure. Yeah.
She hid them, but there was no relationship with God with peace that came with that. You know what I'm saying? There's a point in all of our lives, but you see it laid out here, that her option was, I can be terrified, or I can take this fear and trust somebody. I can trust, I can trust this God that I don't know anything about.
Yeah. Well, you're right, because just that she had to be afraid to talk to those guys. Think about that first moment, that first word out of her mouth. when she goes,
Look,
hey, I
don't
know
care,
who you are.
I don't care how much of a boss she was. Knowing that those guys were under some hay on her roof, the whole time, I would have been nervous wreck. I would have been a nervous wreck because it's just like, if they came to seize, like if they find them here, I'm dead too. My family is dead too. And these guys, I don't even know, but we're about to have a sit down, come to Jesus, for lack of better words. We're going to find out what's going on. And then you're going to have my back because I'm going to have yours. Like she's about to make a business deal, but there was an overwhelming opportunity to be afraid.
Yeah.
But her option was there to just grow in faith. So that was really big for me. And the other thing, and I'd never, ever thought about this, because I've always read the story about Rahab and the red cord and how awesome that was. But for Rahab and her family to be saved, they had to do something.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
Like, it wasn't, she did something. She hid them, but that wasn't enough. Like, she didn't just say, hey, when you come back and you guys take everybody out, remember to spare me. She went as far as saying, see this red cord? I'm going to leave it hanging out. Like, we're marking this house. We're marking it. And I love that it's a red cord, and it makes me think about when God, while all of the Israelites were in Egypt, and they put the blood over their doors to spare their firstborn.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah.
Basically, in their family lineage. And when the angel of death flew over and they were spared, that red cord spared her family. And I don't know, that I think that we've got to remember God is willing to save people who are willing to do their part. Like and you could say, well, that's not true because he sent Jesus. Yeah, but you still have to accept him. You still have to choose to follow him. God will give us opportunity to grow in our skills, in our passions, in our sports, in our relationships, whatever, like in our businesses. But we don't just get to sit there and do nothing. God's like, do your part. What you can't do, I can, but you still have to do your part.
Yeah.
Right. And whatever that looks like.
Sure.
And so the simplicity of her hiding them, then talking with them, and she didn't say, and I love this, she didn't say, remember me. She said, remember my dad's household. Like when you look at scripture, meaning everyone that lived in her home.
Right.
And you have to know, and you've got to think about the fact that they haven't encountered these guys. They're just probably as evil as everybody else in the whole country, and yet she's stepping up for somebody who's not realizing what's about to happen. Like, I mean, process that one out for a minute. She's speaking on behalf of people that are corrupt. And she says, look, I'm willing to pay the price. It was a very, very, very small picture of what Jesus did for us. Stepped in on our behalf. Like, I mean, have you ever thought about it like that? Like,
No, it's a different twist than what
and I don't want to take it out of context by any means, but just the fact that God's called you and I to be people who step in for somebody else, to do the right thing, even if others aren't.
Right.
You know?
And if I'm following you, like basically her faith and her actions saved her entire family.
Right.
Just like Jesus's actions saved the world.
Right. And the beautiful thing is, you can't save people. You can't say, well, I followed God, so everybody in my family gets to go to heaven. I had a relationship with Jesus. Right. But what that means is, because I chose to follow Christ, my example puts them in a position where they can see truth.
Yeah.
Our choices, good, bad, or indifferent, impact and affect everyone around us. Right? Like, how many times have you told our kids growing up, every choice has a consequence?
Yeah.
Good and bad. And so she wasn't like, sweet, I'm gonna let you guys out the window. And I'm gonna put this, protect me. She said, my home, my house,
Right.
everybody in it. And I thought about, you said that, and it was kind of like for a moment, I just kind of got stuck in my thoughts. What was that like when Israel sieged that entire country? The Israelites just took over.
When that wall fell.
Exactly. And they're all inside. And not to be gory and doom and gloom, they had to have heard the cries and the fighting and the
Sure.
but to know that I had an option of being afraid or letting my faith grow, that red cord hanging out that window. I mean, imagine what her family would have thought. What's happening? What's happening? She's like, y'all just calm down. I made some chicken and dumplings. We're going to sit here and play cards. And I don't know, like, we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
All of this stuff is happening around us. But in this house, the wall has fallen. There is chaos happening outside. There is a war. How many people are dying? But we're okay.
Go fish.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's no explanation really that they probably would understand. So these spies came, y'all. I know it doesn't make sense, but we worked out a deal. Like, there had to have been a level of fear that you could not dismiss in that house. But yet at the same time, this peace. And then it was over. And what did you say? That everyone in the whole country, besides her family,
Yeah. They were all gone.
they were gone. And I think about just the way our world looks right now. And I ask myself, ask yourself, can I trust God on the inside, regardless of what's happening on the outside? I mean, the Bible doesn't go into detail about the sounds and the smells and the earth shaking feeling of walls tumbling and mass chaos. And yet within that home, because God made a promise, he kept his promise.
Yeah.
And like, you see stories like that throughout scripture, but wow, like, I've never thought about it like that. And it was an opportunity for her, that godly fear, that fear of what she knew God was capable of, that it saved her and ultimately turned their life around. And like you said, she's part of the lineage of Jesus. And so then my last thought, and this is the one that I've always thought about when it comes to Rahab, and I love so much, is that God's purpose isn't limited to our past. And I think that so often people look at Christians or the church, or however you want to look at it, and they think, well, you don't know my past, man. You don't know where I keep failing, or you don't know about these struggles that I have. Nobody knows about this. And if anybody knew, and we can get so caught up in our past, we forget that there's nothing about our past that God doesn't already know. And he's already planned a future for us despite our past. And this is a perfect story. Like, she wasn't coming out of prostitution and she was like, excuse me, spies, let me tell you my testimony about how God redeemed me. Like, she's hustling. Yeah. She's doing this, right?
Yeah, right.
And through that, God used her. How much can God use you and I despite our past? Like, how much if you're watching this and you're like, man, I am a hot mess. Cool. God is in the business of meeting hot messes and doing something amazing with that.
Yeah.
You see it all through the Bible. It starts with that godly fear and allowing it to grow and develop faith. I mean, I'm so glad that this was my favorite, because I just love her. I love that she didn't hide who she was, but neither did God. We don't have to hide who we are, because God already sees that. But he's not hiding who he is either. And if we will give him an opportunity, we can be overwhelmed with how big and awesome he is. And to know that despite the chaos that's happening around us, not that we don't feel it. Okay, like, let's be real. They weren't in a protective bubble. They felt it. It was scary. Sure. It's not about like,
they heard it and all that stuff.
They knew those people. Like, think about that. That was their friends. These people, those were her customers. They were like people that they knew, and they're gone. And so I think that there's something, we think that, I shouldn't have to feel anything if God's protecting me. You're still going to feel it. You're still going to see it. You're still going to know it. But yet they walked out of that. And I think that there's something so powerful about that, that even though you're going through hard times, you're going through. You're not stuck there. That doesn't define you. That's not the end. And I think that that's so powerful. So thank you. It was awesome. Awesome lesson.
That's all. It took me a minute to kind of wrap my mind around, like, especially that first point, of fear was the beginning of her faith. But as you were talking, I was reminded of the verse in Proverbs chapter 1, where it says the beginning of all that fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where she found herself.
Yes, and we think that, I don't want to be afraid. Man, you don't have to be afraid. I mean, we all deal with fear, but fear of God is more of just a revelation.
It's a reverence and a respect for God, of who he is,
Awesome he is, yeah.
Yeah, and what he's capable of.
Yes, and I think that when we realize we don't even know what he's capable of, it kind of just brings us back down to size, Right. So, okay, so what is our challenge for this week? I mean, I love this so much. So
Yeah. Well, we talked about it a little bit, but I think, to me, the thing that stands out with Rahab and the thing that we can aim at this week is to be a loyal friend to someone, there's people in our lives that that we can stand up for, that we can be there in a way that when they're down and out, when they're in trouble, when they're needing us, that we can be there.
So give me an example of what would that look like? Yes, being a loyal friend, I think that's a great idea, but give some examples, because I think sometimes we think friendship is just we hang out, we were at this party, we went to this business dinner, we went to the football game, we go to the same church and we had lunch afterwards. I mean, whatever. But it's so much more than that. Like, we think friendship is about the fun, but a loyal friend is there when no one else is. Right.
Yeah. So, it's being there in that hard moment. Some of the things I think about, are some of the phone calls that you get a lot of times late at night. You're tired, you're worn out, and yet someone calls and they're upset. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to think, and where's God. Sometimes being a loyal friend is just stopping and giving someone attention, being there for someone, praying with them when they need it. When I'm like, because me, I mean, at 9 o'clock I'm ready to go to bed,
you're done.
but I'm like, but you just kind of jump up and you're there in that moment. I think that, another thing is to be loyal to someone is to be honest and truthful.
Right.
Sometimes having a hard conversation with someone about something that you see them going in a wrong direction in their life, isn't comfortable.
Right.
It's not easy, but
Yeah, because we don't want to be the bad guy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But do you want to see him fail or
Right.
win? And so, I mean, we don't have walls about to collapse on us that we can,
That we
be
know of.
loyal.
Just kidding.
Yeah, but I think that there's a lot of things like that. There's a lot
Right.
of moments like that where we can be a true friend
Right.
in a moment when someone needs us.
Right. So I think that if you're listening to this challenge and you're like, well, what if I don't have anybody going through stuff? Well, I think the challenge there is to stop, pray, and ask the Holy Spirit to remind you. Every single one of us knows somebody who's going through things. And maybe it's just a reminder of, oh yeah, I forgot. His wife lost her job and she was carrying their insurance. And I know that's super stressful. And God brings that to your memory, calling and checking on them.
Yeah.
That's that simple. It's not like, well, I've got to find somebody who right now something bad is happening. No, you know somebody who's going through something, even if it's not immediately in your mind, but take some time and pray and say, Lord, who is it in my life right now that I need to show loyalty to, that I need to be an example of a loyal friend to, and let God remind you. And if you may have several, you may go, oh, wow, I need to, it's as simple as, because here's the reality, we can't fix things for people.
No.
You know, we don't have the cures for cancer, for COVID, for all these things, but just being present, calling and going, hey, I just want you to know I was praying. The Lord put you on my mind, and I wanted to call, check on you. How is that going with this situation? How are you doing? So it could be, even if you're in high school and you're going, okay, so I'm not really providing for my family or any of those things yet. It could be something as simple as I had a friend who is struggling in a class, and I know that they're giving it their all. Just calling and checking on them. That they lost the game, and they're pretty discouraged about that. Calling and checking on them. So-and-so's mom has cancer, and I know that we pray together when we've prayed together, but just that follow up. That being loyal is that not just in the moment, but it's that follow up. Hey, can I do something for you? You know, what's going on? A perfect example. That I love this because I'm a student pastor, and I had COVID, and a student in my youth group didn't tell me he was doing this, but it was right in the height of COVID, so everybody was terrified of everything. And DoorDash comes to our door with like a dozen spicy chicken sandwiches from Popeyes. And I'm like,
I remember that.
What is this? You know, and it was just, and then I get a text. Did you get your dinner? And I'm thinking that's what loyalty looks like. It's just, what can I do to show somebody that I care? So, you know,
and it might too. Maybe you can't think of someone in your immediate like circle of people that you're engaged with right now. Maybe it's somebody from your past. Maybe it's an old friend. Maybe it's someone that you used to live around. And God, as you just pray about this and ask God, show me people that I can be loyal to.
Right.
Maybe it's picking up the phone and calling somebody, or calling a grandparent or something like that that you don't normally do.
Call, right.
Hey, how are you doing? I just calling to let you know I love you and I'm thinking about you. And
it could be somebody that you don't even know very well.
Could.
I heard a story from a friend that they have their neighbors both have COVID. And so what they did was they have a lawn service that comes and does their lawn. Her husband walked outside and said, hey, what will you charge me to go and take care of theirs too? Just
cool.
Knowing that, they know each other. They exchange, Christmas baked goods, things like that. How you doing kind of thing. Yeah. But just not going over and bothering them, just take care of it.
Yeah.
And paid them, and it was done. And it was never done for the intention of, hey, are you going to tell me thank you? Or, hey, I did this for you. It was just, I'm just being a loyal friend. I think the
I love that.
possibilities are, I do too. I think
Yeah.
the possibilities are endless. Don't complicate it. But if you can't think of somebody, stop and pray.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear what everybody's doing, how the Lord has used this to impact your life and the lives of the people around you.
Yeah,
It's gonna be great.
Very cool. Hey, thank you guys so much for joining us again this week, and we will see you again next week.
Absolutely.